Okay. Thank you very much to all of those who have chosen chat B. You made the right choice. Chat A is, of course, extremely interesting as well, but we're very happy to have a nice group of people here to discuss our subject, which concerns the way we deal in the political institutions with societal expectations and societal interaction regarding new technological innovations. I have here a member of the European Parliament, Matthias van Mittelberg. I have a member of a national parliament from Estonia, Paling, and I have a person who I believe can give us a critical look at these things, Nadine Smith from the Center for Political Impact, Public Impact. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open up a very short exchange between the four of us, and then open up to a question and answer session with you. Please, when you have the opportunity to put questions on the Slido so that we can see them coming up on the screen, and then we'll try to address those as the presentation goes on. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Michael Matlos, and I'm the president of Euroscience, the European Association for the Advancement of Science and Technology, which is a grassroots organization bringing together researchers, scientists, and science professionals, such as science teachers, science communicators, and science journalists. And we organize a very large event, the Euroscience Open Forum, which will take place next year in July in Trieste, concerning the interface between science and society. And I think that this is an excellent introduction to our topical area. Now I'd like to give the floor to Matthias to talk to us a little bit about intelligent transport systems and the way that interacts with the political decision-making processes and also the interaction with society. So Matthias?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here and to discuss with you issues that I think are very challenging also for the new Parliament. And somehow I feel a bit awkward because I'm an outgoing member of the European Parliament, but still I would like to share my experience over the past 5 years with you, and hopefully you will also discuss it in the next years to come with new members of the European Parliament. So I would like to mention 3 lessons learned over the last 5 years, and to share the experience with you. First of all, when we talk about, for instance, intelligent transport systems, or when we talk about the future of aviation, with the integration in the airspace of drones, the unmanned aircraft, then my conclusion is, over the last 5 years, that many times the decision makers, Commission, Council, and European Parliament act in a way that I should define as too little, too late. I will explain. First of all, I think when we take the legislative process in Europe, it has really difficulties to keep pace with all the technological advancements. And what we do as European Parliament, we try to control things, but we are always too late. The same applies to the Commission, and the same applies, unfortunately, to the Council. In the example where we discuss intelligent transport systems, it took really years, while everyone embraced the general statement that Europe should be the front runner, and the same applies to drones. We should be the front runner at the international level, but we can't, as a, let's say, legislator, we can't keep pace with technologies. And that all has to do with trust. We as European Parliament, unfortunately, are not able to loosen the grip on things because we think we will be out of control. And it seems like a bit of an inner contradiction, but I think if we want to become a front runner, and for instance to integrate in a safe way new forms of intelligent transport systems or drones, we need to enable the European Commission, more or less as the European government, to come forward with detailed rules. So, to wrap up this point, which is my first point, and then I will go quickly to the 2 other points, I think here we should really discuss what is the level of intervention of European Parliament, of the European Commission, of the Council, both playing their roles in the decision-making process, and I would define it that we should get back control while loosening the grip. And it seems, again, an inner contradiction, but the same will apply to intelligent transport systems. You will be more in control in your automated self-driving vehicle, when you just take your hands off the steering wheel. And on the other hand, and perhaps that's an issue for discussion, we need more legislative intervention, for instance, when it comes up to the transparency of algorithms. Algorithms will decide in the future for us. So there we need really to make sure that they comply with our ethical and moral standards. And that's my second point. Don't forget about the moral, ethical, social dimension when we make legislation. And my last point, and there I think I will open the possibility also for Nadine to intervene, it's all about trust and it's all about broad social support to make sure that we keep pace with technological advancements, that we are enabling them for the benefit of society, but there we have to, and probably it will be subject to discussion, to make sure that society embrace these kind of technologies, and there we have to think about how to make sure that we keep the trust of both people in our society, but also, that's my last point, of entrepreneurs. Because if Europe really wants to become the front runner in terms of technologies, artificial intelligence related to quantum computing, intelligent transport systems, and so on, then we need to make sure that we have the trust of the people, but also of the entrepreneurs, because if they decide in the end not to invest in Europe, but to go to China or the USA, I think it will be a missed opportunity for Europe. So I think lots of lessons learned, and I hope that the new European Parliament, as part of this co-decision-making process in Europe, will also take them on board in their way of thinking in the next years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Matthias. As you know, the European Union is not a homogeneous entity, and there's going to be a very important role in the interaction between the society and technological innovation on the national level. So we have the opportunity here to have a member of a national parliament and a very special country, Estonia, which has done things that in other countries we wouldn't even want to talk about regarding e-administration and e-governance. And Kalle has been really at the head of this, and I think that he should explain to us how the interaction with the society in Estonia is different perhaps from other countries that we know. I live in France, Matthias in the Netherlands. Some of the things they're doing in Estonia we wouldn't even talk about. So how is that working, and what is the cultural specificity, and how does the national parliament intervene in this area?
Thank you. I might say that we used to do well in that area, and now I'll give a short introduction in the feeling that I have for the future of European Union. And it's especially important for the next Commission and the Parliament to deal with issues which are not directly European issues in the next upcoming years. And these are globalization, climate change, and the population growth outside European Union, which is approximately 1 billion extra inhabitants in 13 years. So this is the context that we are living in, and if we don't take action in terms of fight against climate change and don't find the solution for the migration issues in a way that the people are traveling because of the climate change and the population growth, we don't have time to focus on these issues that Mattis, for example, talked about, because I mean all these other issues, migration mainly, is shadowing all the discussions around innovation and so on. The World Economic Forum Davos meeting was excellent example where Merkel and Theresa May couldn't make it to discuss globalization 4.0 because they had internal issues in their own countries which are caused because of the globalization, mainly migration and then Brexit then. So that's the context and that's the time we're living in. But in Estonian case, we didn't have any influence and spillover effect from the world politics and European politics before the 2015 migration crisis, and since then we've actually been discussing more about these things the threats that people have, not about the possibilities that technology could bring, that the innovation could bring, and so on and so on. And if you don't have a good solution for the people in this field, then it's pretty hard to talk about innovation. So even though we build up a system which is based on trust, and so far we've been quite lucky. So yeah, there are many fields for the future. The most important is probably education, because I believe that the speed of the development of technology is so high that currently we are focusing on education, which is basically, I'm provocative here, but it's a waste of time. So we must redefine the education that's given in universities. It's estimated that during the next 5 years, technology will change as much as it has changed during the last 100 years. And if we think that the average period in university is almost 5 years to get a master's degree, so it's basically 100 years that you spent in the university then. And if we talk about lifelong learning, it can't be the course somewhere in the middle of your life. So basically, education in the future must be a lifestyle. It's even a term, education as a lifestyle. So basically, after secondary school, after gymnasium, you're going to the university for the lifetime. It's one opportunity, and the other opportunity, which I said yesterday in the other panel as well, is to put expiration date on your university diploma, which means that you'll always have to upskill and reskill yourself if you want to keep on track, and this must be done in a collaboration with entrepreneurs and with the society and with the education system. So there are many things to do and to redefine, and probably the biggest challenge nowadays is that politicians, as us here, as some of us here in the panel, let's say, if I talk to my colleagues in many countries, so there is a huge leap of understanding what the technology could really bring and how could it make our life easier and the decision making easier. So maybe the society and the people in the societies aren't the ones that are afraid. Politicians and decision makers are much more afraid, and this is a huge problem actually, which I see, because I've done a lot of reforms. I've been invited to many conferences and many roundtables to talk about, for example, legislation which I did in my country to make Uber and Taxify and Lyft legal and create the framework for them, and it's really hard to explain what the solution exactly is and why it is different to taximeter and let's say this traditional taxi sector. So, but we did it, and currently at least 5 countries in the EU have followed our example and basically copy-pasted the regulations. So there are some that has followed.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Now, very quickly over to Nadine. You've listened to member of the European Parliament, a member of a national parliament, different types of people, different types of approaches, different types of cultures. What about public impact and the center of public impact? How do you view all these things? What do you want to say? What's your message?
So I think I happen to agree with some of what Matthias said. I think it's important that we understand this concept of control much, much better, because the fact that governments like to hold on to control whilst also fearing technology and people is having a profound impact on society and the progress that we can make in trying to make sure that technology can work as best as it possibly can for people. We're also not helped by this prevailing narratives that governments, quite frankly, are sitting back and allowing to watch happen. A prevailing narrative that tells us that AI and automation will either change your lives tomorrow or will end the world tomorrow. This prevailing narrative has to be put to some kind of stop, or needs to be redefined. I mean, on one hand, most homes still don't even have a smart meter. You know, our countries are trying to talk about getting 5G, some places in Europe still don't have 3G or 4G. You know, I think that the narrative is really jumbled, and no wonder everyone is feeling rather scared. So how can we bring people, government and technology together? Because currently they're really not in sync. And the answer really lies in building legitimacy bottom up around all three. So right now, everyone will agree in this room that legitimacy is weakening across institutions, parliaments across the European Union, including in my own country where I live in the United Kingdom. Now, technology, as we've heard here, could actually, ironically, help us to build better relationships with people. Technology could be a way of us having those conversations and redefining that narrative. But unless governments understand how to build legitimacy, that will fail. Because the problem is, people do not come first. Technology comes first. And as we've heard, people, institutions, the law, regulation, races up behind and tries to catch up, and it doesn't do so. And when we look around us every day, technology and automation is rather scary. Look what happened at Heathrow Airport when the drones closed our airport, one of the busiest airports in the world. Look how cities are banning facial recognition because we don't know why it's being used. Who's looking at it? Is it being shared with Interpol? I don't know. Do you know? So, you know, really this is a conversation that has to happen. But when we don't put people first, technology doesn't do its best, it just does its worst. And the consequences don't just mean, oh, what a shame we've missed out on the fourth industrial revolution. The consequences are the weakening of governments across Europe and the divisive and more divisive, less trusting societies. And I'll tell you an example in Toronto, where a smart city was supposed to be built by the internet. This Toronto city was supposed to offer citizens the chance to experience the very latest technology on their doorstep. This bold experiment was supposed to be a model for the rest of the world that would mean collecting a lot of data from sensors placed all over the harbour side of this place. Now, it's been put to a stop because people didn't understand why such data was being collected and why the private sector was having such access to this information. Government looks again out of depth, untrustworthy, and possibly even uncaring as we progress through this fourth industrial revolution. Contrast that with Japan, with its 5.0 strategy. They are thinking about the collective good that can happen from technology. They're thinking about how technology could even help people decide what kind of society they want to become together. And similarly, as we heard over here from Estonia, you know, the online platform People's Assembly crowdsourced a number of ideas and proposals to amend Estonia's electoral laws, political party law, and the material, the proposals that came from all over the country were collated and synthesized and voted upon. Some of those have become law. The same has happened in Madrid. Using software that is called Console, people have come together and they've been deliberating about their budgets. People feel they have a stake in their society, enabled by technology, having conversations they've never been able to have before, enabled by technology. The same's happening in Ireland, the same's happening in Iceland. So technology may, ironically, help us out of some of the many deadlocks and these narrow conversations that we keep having about it. It may have even helped us get to a faster, better Brexit solution. It possibly still could. But we're going to have to build a culture of decision-making in which diverse citizen voices really do count. A process of deliberation where citizens can exchange arguments and consider different claims to secure the public good. At CPI, we have found this crisis of legitimacy is hampering everybody, from technology through to our children's futures. People feel a lack of belonging. People don't have a stake in this future. People don't understand the narratives. Many want to be more in control of their lives, the decisions and information, but they also want governments to take care of them too. But governments are going to have to remain in touch with people, they're going to have to work on their behaviours and their mindsets too, and they're going to have to reposition their loyalties back to people. And I'm going to just end by giving you the 5 behaviours that citizens all over the world told us that they wanted to see from government leaders and institutions, no matter what the topic. Empathy, transparency for better scrutiny, working together for shared visions, authenticity, and valuing all citizens' voices and responding to them, whether you can or cannot do what they want. Those are the behaviours that we need to see if we're going to really make the most of this technology and improve lives for the better.
Okay, thank you very much, Nadine. There are quite a lot of different messages coming from the three panelists. I think what we should do in the limited amount of time that we have is to look immediately at what's coming up on the Slido so that we can use some interaction from you. So what I suggest is we'll take 1 or 2 Slido questions, and then we'll see if someone in the audience might want to stand up and take a microphone and ask another question. So I'm going to take the first one that comes up on my list here, which is the question, is more regulation better in the area of new technologies? That's, of course, a very open question. Maybe a very quick answer from the three of you. Matthias?
But it's not all about more. Sometimes it's really doing more with less regulation. So I think that, for instance, European Parliament and Council, when it comes up to regulation, should only provide us with the basic principles for new technologies. For instance, that it should be in conformity with the GDPR when it comes up to privacy and data protection. Or that we think about issues in a way, what are the principles? What do we need to do, for instance, in terms of private liability? When I was working on the drones, one of the things that popped up was in case of an accident. If we don't have any registration at all at a national or European level, it's very easy for someone who is trying to play with a drone to get out of the way as soon as an accident happens. So it's up to the lawmaker to impose rules that are based on principles such as a mandatory registration. But then it's, I think, sometimes up to the Commission to make either detailed rules or to say, here we can trust entrepreneurs, here we can trust the society to come forward with good solutions. So it's not only about more legislation, it's about a tailor-made approach.
Nadine?
I think it's very easy to say that really, we can't trust the entrepreneurs or, the social media platforms, and therefore we should just dump the rest of it back onto government. I don't know if government would actually be any better. I know that, a lot of if we think about the regulation of the social media platforms, for example, they didn't set up in any way ever believing that they might be in this position one day where they're going to have to regulate. But they are changing, they are moving, they're moving faster, and they understand more about what's going on their site than governments. So I don't know whether it might make people feel better if governments regulate and keep regulating. And we've had law lords in the United Kingdom saying, we can't keep up. We're making more laws than Parliament are making now. Do you really want that? Isn't the answer surely that, rather than mistrusting the technological entrepreneurs, but perhaps understanding that they are the closest to the problems that we are seeing. They are the fastest to react. They can take things down quickly. They do so. They don't always do it very well, but I'm not sure governments can do it any better.
Yes, just to link into the second question that I see on Slido before Kalle answers on this question, is more regulation better? There's a question about how states should adjust to new threats like deep fake news in general, cyber threats and such. And I think that the question of the role of governments with respect to the enterprises is a critical issue. Maybe governments are not the only ones who should be regulating things. So how do you feel about that, Kalle, as a national representative in the Parliament?
Well, I think that regulation is important, but there should be execution and action, and not only talking about what could the regulation be. The principle should be less is more, but we couldn't have achieved our, let's say, e-governed state system if the Minister of Justice wouldn't have been, let's say, on the board and full compliant in a way that that all the steps that are done, let's say, behind the screen is somehow regulated. So otherwise people don't trust it. But if regulating the new technologies, we should always keep in mind what Oren Harari has once said, that the electric light didn't come from the continuous improvement of candles. And this is the main thing that the governments in EU and then worldwide are, let's say, missing the point that the new technologies should be the improvement of the previous one.
Yeah.
But if we take the banking system and the cryptocurrencies, so basically, yes, assets will move from one people to another, but the way how it's done is totally different, and we can't put cryptocurrencies into the same regulation as we have for the banking at the moment. And it's the same for the platforms and hotels and platforms and taxi sector and so on and so on. And this is, if the decision makers understand that, then it's so much easier to explain it to the people as well, because they of course have their own threats as well. But policymakers and decision makers can't be the reflection of people's threat. They have to take the leadership, and that's why they are voted. That's why we are paying for the decision makers. Not to be afraid as the people, but to be a leader.
Okay, leading position, Matthias.
May I just add one thing, because I think it all starts also with self-regulation. Look at Facebook. Why do they need interventions of public authorities before they raise the question themselves, are we doing the right thing? I was very lucky to be in Denmark, that's another example, a couple of months ago, and I was visiting a huge multinational which is developing all kinds of technologies based on artificial intelligence, for instance, to make public spaces secure. And one of the things they developed, which I think was awesome, but also really, well, imposing all kinds of ethical and moral questions, is that they put in one American state, as a pilot project, all kinds of cameras in train stations. And with artificial intelligence, based on the behavioral patterns of passengers, they could pick out the persons that were probably going to commit suicide. Very interesting question. I raised over there was, I think, the question, but is this something we are looking forward to as a society? Because what in the case that the algorithms will decide to pick out a Dutch MEP, that's perhaps an outgoing MEP, it's a bit puzzled about his future, a future unemployed, it's my case, I'm looking at the train station, but I'm just dreaming about my new future, I'm a bit puzzled, and my behavioral pattern would be that I will be picked out, probably, because that's what they said, they will send someone to have a deep discussion with this person. Well, my reading was, the people that are behaving in this way will be picked up and put probably in a psychological asylum.
Yeah.
So that's perhaps a nice future for outgoing MEPs, but it's not the future as a society as a whole that I'm waiting for.
Okay, Nadine?
I think often when things go wrong with technology, we like to blame the technology. So we like to say, oh, the technology didn't work, or we need to regulate the technology. I think we need to regulate the people, you know, in charge of these institutions in government, and reset them towards people first. And I know that sounds obvious, but quite honestly, in government, policy and delivery come first, trust building comes last. And I do, for example, facial recognition, I mentioned, had been banned in some parts of the United States. Apparently, the technology has shown to be racially biased. Well, in China, in the technology they built in China for facial recognition, it isn't. So it's not the technology, it's the people developing the technology who don't understand their own communities and people. So let's start there. Let's start with the people. Let's start with understanding the needs in society and how technology can help them. So I love, for example, that there's now technology that can help to detect learning difficulties, dyslexia, very hard to detect dyslexia sometimes in very young children, can help to do that, and that's already happening in some parts of some of the Nordic states. There's some very good things that can happen with technology when you think, what do we need? What are the problems we have in our schools? What is the problem that we have in society that people really want us to try and solve? Let's stop trying to solve for the things nobody wants us to solve for, and let's stop doing it with people that don't understand our communities.
There are a couple of other questions that are somehow related to this I think I'd like to bring up before we go out, just for maybe one or two questions from the audience. Is the question of, there's one question that says, how is the advent of artificial intelligence potentially a threat to the European Union itself? And I think that this is also a question for the institutions. And I see that there was also a question regarding how the European Union can lead the way in global policies that would actually boost governance and the way the public governance works. And I think that Nadine mentioned that technologies are not only a threat, are also an opportunity. Maybe asking the parliamentarians on the stage here, how are the new technologies helping us to boost the quality of governance and the quality of our institutions, and in what ways are they threats to our institutions?
Okay, there is one other challenge which we have in the world nowadays, and this is the talent hunt. So basically all the countries are competing with each other to get the best talent to work for their economy and to work for their companies. And in this competition, I mean, a Japanese citizen don't want to, communicate with Estonian government officials, so they would like to have hassle-free service management. And I always compare nowadays states as private companies and service providers like telcos and like banks. So basically the package should be there. If I'm satisfied with the service, then I'll choose the service provider, which in the current context will be the state. And if we don't understand that, then again we are in a big trouble, because I mentioned before, the world population is growing, but not in the European Union, so the lack of talent is getting a bigger and bigger problem, and the need to attract the talent from outside the European Union is getting more and more important. So I would say that it must be improved in all the fields. Mm-hmm. States should act in the same way as banks and telcos to improve clients.
Okay, Matthias, say something about this, and while he's saying that, could somebody raise their hand so that we can have a question from the audience with the microphone? Okay, Matthias.
I think artificial intelligence, new technologies, they pose opportunities but also risks to the public sector. Opportunities, for instance, in the field of healthcare, education, but also improving transport management systems. And on the other end, it could also be a risk. If I may ask you, who would be in favor to use artificial intelligence in our judicial system? Would you like to be convicted on the basis of artificial intelligence, or do you prefer a human being or several human beings being the judge of your behavior? I'm not quite sure you will choose artificial intelligence, because in the end we always would like to have a chain of command in which the human beings are in that chain at the top to make the decisions.
Kala wanted to say something, and then Nadine. Very quickly, and then Nadine.
Yeah, about the artificial intelligence. Just take one example, autonomous cars. So do you know how many kilometers autonomous cars have to test in the test fields before they go to public use? How many kilometers? Somebody raise hand? No, it's 1 million kilometers. So how many of us will have 1 million kilometers of practice before getting driver license? None. And this is the context that we should understand as well. So this 1 million kilometers is done to test all the possible situations that could happen in the traffic. And this is the same way with all the other artificial intelligence solutions. So it's a long learning curve, and then the machine could be better than the human being, because all the possible, let's say, failures have been tested during the process.
Okay, Nadine?
I was just going to pick up on the point about would you choose the human or the AI, just for a bit of fun, but I don't know. I mean, I go and see my doctor sometimes, and he or she looks really rather tired, and they're Googling symptoms in front of me, and I'm thinking, and then I sometimes go to the doctor and they say to me, all right, Nadine, you tell us what you think you've got. You've probably been searching on Google anyway. And I say, I think I've got this. And they say, yeah, I think you probably do, but let me also search on Google. So I don't know. I think, if a doctor's seen 16 patients that day and is exhausted, maybe I would rather see an AI that could do a quick scan and work out quickly what was wrong with me. Maybe. There's some positives for technology around the 5 behaviors I mentioned for legitimacy that leaders need to adopt. Transparency, I think technology offers the opportunity for institutions to be far more transparent about their decision making. Working together towards shared visions. This is happening, as I said, in many parts of the world. Even in Jamaica, they've been thinking together about what they can do to build a future, and doing that through online platforms. And then valuing citizens' voices and responding to them. There's another way that technology can help you do that. The risk is that you do that in the same old ways with the same old mindset, with no empathy, no understanding for people, and it's a top-down approach. That is not authentic, which is one of the other key behaviors that I said was important to build the legitimacy of people, institutions, and technology. So those would be the risks, is if we just keep going and thinking, well, here's the answer, a platform, here's the answer, an AI doctor, here's the answer, and we don't think about empathy within that.
So, can someone please raise their hand? For example, someone who put a question on Slido and I didn't address. You can now get it in. No one wants to raise a question by them verbally? You like our voices. We have very nice voices, all of us. Okay, what I'll do then is I'll pick up another one of the questions. There's a question about, because Kalle mentioned this question about changes in education, this provoked some reaction in the audience. They say, in the technology fields, which parts of the curricula would you leave out to redefine the educational programs? I suppose that people are thinking more here about higher education programs, engineering programs, things like that, where today there are some things that people are learning that may be outdated quickly. Do you have any specific reflections on how we go about identifying what should be eliminated and what should be retained?
I guess that we should bring some of the curriculums on a lower level of education anyway. I mean, to start some programs already in kindergarten, then on the first grades, and the secondary school or gymnasium should be something like a baccalaureate degree in the university at the moment. And the idea is not to, I mean, the idea is not to destroy and lose all the universities, but mainly for a professional training, for engineering, for that kind of stuff. I mean, it's so specific in different enterprises, and it should be done in the workplace. So and that's why we don't need universities in the way that they are now. And this is what I meant in redefining. And education as a lifestyle means that it can't be this way that you go to a university for 5 years and then you'll enjoy the ride for your lifetime. So as we are living in the era of technology, so there must be an reskilling, upskilling all the time, and this means that it's also about guiding the expectations. So I mean, if you go to a work and at the same time to school for the place and to learn the same thing that you're working on, then there is a focus, then there is less waste of time. If I went to university, then I have to live a poor life during 3 or 5 years, work in a bar after school to pay the rent for the apartment. But why should it be this way? Why can't I get just paid a little bit less than with a degree, but work in the same place? And this is the reality in Estonia, for example. I mean, from the half of the first course, IT engineers will be hired to the IT companies and get paid 5,000 euros per month or something like that. So and if you have this to calculate for your life, so should I spend another 3 years and get my degree and go to work then, or to go to work and then learn at the same time? Then I think that this is the reality already. Just that universities don't want to understand that.
And I think that what you're proposing is a very revolutionary idea, to get away from rights and privileges and to go towards competencies and skills, and the needs of the employers with respect to competencies and skills rather than diplomas and degrees. And you're going directly to the heart of the organization of about 500 years of university development. So obviously this is going to have to be done very carefully with the society and with the universities themselves, because if we do it from a top-down perspective, then obviously there's going to be a lot of resistance, whereas actually it's a wonderful opportunity. And in particular, digital technologies can be very helpful in this regard. So Matthias and then Nadine.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think we need to work on a way to innovate our educational systems, to take on board more the development of digital skills. But my second point is we also need to have crossovers between sciences. So technology as such can be developed, but I think we need also to take on board, for instance, all the science that are related to the ethical, social, moral dimension.
Yeah.
If I see, most of the innovative policies are always based on crossovers. And I have a very nice example in my own home region, which is the southern part of the Netherlands, where two universities, a technical university of Eindhoven, together with a university that is very good in social science, University of Tilburg, they work together in a new school, in a new university, where they have this kind of crossovers between social science and technologies. And the funny thing is that most of the students that are now taken at the University of Eindhoven, they are not just seduced by the curriculum that is proposed, work on a technology which is nanotechnology. They are seduced by the fact that they can use the technologies to solve societal challenges. So we've seen that also in the way the marketing is done by this university, is that they just put the technological developments in the heart of the challenges of society tomorrow. And that, I think, is the winning solution, the crossovers, and to make sure that all younger generations are not just focusing on developing technologies, but always try to bear in mind the question, what is it good for, and how is it linked to society?
Okay, Nadine, last word, you have 90 seconds.
Okay, I completely agree with that. I think we need to teach young children how to be human today in this rapidly changing world of technology. What does it really mean to be a human being in all of that? We could look at the traditional subjects that can help us to do that, though. It doesn't necessarily mean a whole new way of teaching. For example, teaching children the real history of Europe. That's not taught in the schools in the United Kingdom. There was no appreciation of where Europe has come from and post-war Europe in the classrooms. Some children have never been taught this. So I think we need to think about understanding where we've come from, the wrongs we have done to others in the world, which is important if we're going to work in much more inclusive workspaces, where people from minority ethnic groups are telling me that there is no understanding of where they have come from, how they have arrived here in this country, in the countries that we are all living in. So we need to rethink history, we need to understand our history together, and we also need to understand how to work together in the future. We have aging populations. I'm not going anywhere, yet my workplace is getting younger and younger. How are we going to work together across the generations when people in their 50s and 60s and possibly 70s are not going to retire? And that is a really important intergenerational working together mix that you just don't get at school or at university enough. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Nadine. We're at the end of the time that's allotted for our Chat B. I'd like to thank all of you that were so polite to stay a little bit over time for the end of our chat. I'd like to thank our panel members for wonderfully exciting and dynamic responses to the questions. I'd like to thank you, all of you who put the Slido questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. And I would like to wish you all a pleasant break after this chat session and a very, very nice afternoon. So, bye-bye to everyone.